Hello. You are on the channel Archives of Fear, Lost Chronicles, a place where the darkest stories come to life, where nightmares and legends lurk, the kind that make your blood run cold. Make yourself comfortable, maybe even turn off the lights, because tonight you're about to hear a story that might make the darkness feel very different from now on. So, let's begin. The Lease of a Soul. This is a story about how sometimes mercy becomes a trap, and old age is nothing more than a mask for something that has no age. Anna found the advertisement on a weathered utility pole. Caregiver needed for Mrs. Eloise, live-in position, high pay, quiet environment. After months of being broke in the noisy city, it felt like salvation. The house stood on the edge of a small settlement, surrounded by a tall fence tangled with thorny bushes. Eloise greeted her in a wheelchair. She was fragile, with porcelain skin and eyes the color of stagnant water. She barely spoke, usually just pointing with a thin, bony finger at whatever she needed. "Just don't go into the basement, child," she croaked on the first evening. "My husband's old things are stored there. They prefer silence." The first week passed strangely. Anna noticed that there wasn't a single mirror in the house. Every mirror had been covered with thick black cloth or removed entirely, leaving pale rectangular marks on the wallpaper. When Anna asked about it, Eloise only smiled, revealing teeth that were far too white and even for someone her age. "Beauty is a thief, Anna. If you stare at it too long, it steals your life." The 10th day. On the 10th day, the strange things began. Anna awoke in the middle of the night, feeling someone gently stroking her hair. She would open her eyes suddenly, only to find the room empty, yet the pillow smelled of damp herbs and dried herbs. Soon her personal belongings began disappearing. First her comb, then a hairpin, then her favorite red ribbon. One afternoon, while cleaning Eloise's room, Anna discovered an old wooden box beneath the bed. Inside were no jewels. Instead, there were locks of hair, different colors, each tied neatly with thread. Attached to every lock was a small tag with a name and a date. The most recent lock was wheat blonde, exactly the same color as Anna's hair, but she had never given the old woman a single strand. The second week brought the true horrors. Anna began noticing changes in Eloise. Her wrinkles seemed less deep. The walker she used was no longer necessary. The old woman moved around the house confidently, almost silently. At the same time, Anna felt an unbearable weakness. Her hands trembled constantly, and each morning she could barely lift her head from the pillow. The night song. One night, when the moon lit the corridor with cold silver light, Anna heard singing. It came from the basement. Forgetting the warning, she followed the sound downstairs. The basement was not filled with junk as she had expected. It was clean, sterile. In the center of the room stood a large table covered with glass jars. Inside each jar, something floated in a cloudy liquid. Anna lifted her flashlight and looked closer and screamed, covering her mouth. Inside the jars were human eyes, brown, blue, green. They were not dead. Their pupils shrank when the flashlight's beam touched them. On the wall hung a collection of photographs of young women, all of them smiling, all of them former caregivers. Beneath each photograph was a small note: "End of service." "You shouldn't have come down here," Eloise's voice whispered behind her. Anna turned. The old woman was standing upright. She was no longer hunched. Her face looked like a mask that had been partially smoothed out by invisible hands, but in her eyes burned a hungry, predatory energy. "What did you do to them?" Anna whispered, backing against the wall. "I only borrowed their youth," Eloise said calmly, stepping closer. "The world is terribly unfair, child. You young people waste your time on foolish things. I know its value." She smiled. "You're so beautiful, Anna. Your skin, your voice, they will become mine." Anna tried to run, but the basement door slammed shut by itself. She rushed towards the small window near the ceiling, but suddenly her legs felt heavy, as if filled with lead. She collapsed onto the cold concrete floor. In front of her, Eloise slowly removed the black cloth from one of the mirrors. "Look, Anna," she whispered. "Look how you disappear." Anna stared into the mirror. She saw only a blurred shadow. Her reflection began separating from her body, sliding towards Eloise like smoke. She tried to scream, but from her throat came only the hoarse rasp of an old woman. Morning. The village was quiet the next morning. A small truck arrived at the house to collect the belongings of Mrs. Eloise's supposedly young niece, who had left suddenly during the night. A woman stepped out of the house. She wore Anna's dress. She had Anna's hair, Anna's smile. Only her eyes were cold like stagnant water. She walked to the mailbox and pinned a new advertisement to it. "Caregiver needed. High pay. Quiet environment guaranteed." The real Anna was never seen again. Only in the basement, inside a newly filled glass jar, appeared a pair of beautiful gray eyes. They stared forever into the darkness, begging for death that would never come.
Echo of the Dead Horizon. This is a story about how some doors are better left closed, and some secrets should remain buried beneath tons of stone and the weight of time. The town of Oak Creek was known for two things: dense pine forests and old limestone quarries that riddled the earth like holes in Swiss cheese. Local legends claimed that beneath the town stretched a network of catacombs built long before the first settlers ever set foot on this land. Max, the unofficial leader of the group, had managed to obtain an old map. With him were Artem, a quiet boy with constant skepticism; Dan, the joker who hid his fear behind humor; Katya, a professional gymnast with incredible endurance; and Lisa, a girl with a vivid imagination who was terrified of the dark but followed the group anyway. The 5 teenagers stood in front of a rusty gate covering an abandoned entrance hidden in a ravine behind an old factory. "Guys, maybe we shouldn't do this," Lisa whispered, staring into the black mouth of the tunnel. "Oh, come on, Liz," Dan said with a wink, switching on a powerful flashlight. "1 hour inside, a couple photos for the blog, and we're out." None of them knew that stepping over that threshold would become the beginning of their personal hell. For the first 30 minutes, everything was calm. The tunnels were wide, the walls cold and damp. But the deeper they went, the more the architecture began to change. The rough limestone gradually gave way to perfectly carved stone blocks covered in strange, unfamiliar symbols. "Look at this," Katya said, running her hand along the wall. "This doesn't look like a mine. It looks like a temple complex." Suddenly, Artem stopped. "Do you hear that?" Everyone froze. From deep within the tunnel came a sound. It wasn't wind. It was whispering, thousands of overlapping voices forming an incomprehensible murmur. It felt as if the walls themselves were trying to speak. "We're going back," Max said sharply. He unfolded the map and froze. The ink had vanished completely, leaving nothing but empty yellow paper. They turned to head back toward the entrance, but the tunnel they had come through ended in a dead end. The wall there was ancient, covered with moss. It could not have appeared in 30 minutes. It had been there for centuries. Panic began to seep into their hearts like cold water into cracks in stone. 6 hours passed. Their flashlights began to dim. The space around them seemed to distort. Corridors would suddenly narrow until they were forced to crawl on their stomachs, then expand into vast chambers the size of football stadiums, where their light couldn't reach the ceiling. The voices grew louder. Now they weren't whispering, they were calling their names. Dan, come back. His dead grandmother's voice echoed from a side passage. Dan screamed and ran in the opposite direction. The others barely managed to grab him. They were exhausted. Their water was gone. Hunger twisted their stomachs. But the worst part was the shadow effect. Each of them began to see silhouettes. They didn't attack. They simply stood at the edge of the light, tall, shapeless figures bending at unnatural angles. "They're waiting for us to fall asleep," Lisa whispered, sitting on the floor and rocking back and forth. Her eyes were red from tears and dust. At one point, while crossing a massive hall with columns shaped like gigantic spines, something grabbed Katja by the leg. She didn't even have time to scream. Something invisible dragged her into the darkness with terrifying force. "Katja!" Max shouted, running after her and waving his flashlight wildly. They found her 10 minutes later. She was standing inside a stone niche facing the wall. When she turned around, her face was pale as chalk. Her pupils were gone, replaced by enormous black circles. "There is no end," she whispered in a hollow voice. "We're already dead. Our bodies just haven't realized it yet." 12 hours in the darkness. The teenagers' minds began to break. Artem started laughing uncontrollably, claiming he could see the sun on the ceiling. Dan went silent, his eyes glassy and empty. They entered a section where the air smelled of ozone and rot. Their flashlights were barely alive now, casting only weak yellow light. That's when they saw the thing that lives below. It wasn't a creature in any ordinary sense. It was a mass of dark matter, constantly pulsing. It flowed slowly through the corridor, absorbing stone and air alike. Anywhere it passed, absolute emptiness remained behind it. "Run!" Max shouted, grabbing Lisa by the arm. They ran blindly. The psychological terror reached its peak. Each of them felt as if their skin was turning to stone, as if their lungs were filling with sand. They saw hallucinations, their own funerals, the faces of their parents twisting into monstrous masks. Lisa suddenly screamed when she felt a cold, sticky hand on her shoulder. It wasn't one of her friends. It was one of the silhouettes. It leaned close to her ear and produced a sound like 1,000 babies screaming at once. When hope was finally gone, when they were ready to collapse on the cold stone floor and wait for death, Artem noticed something strange. "Look at the smoke from my cigarette," he said. He wasn't actually smoking, it was only his imagination, but he pointed at the movement of air. "There's a draft." They gathered the last of their strength. They crawled through a crack so narrow their chests were compressed against the stone. Katja, despite her condition, helped the others through. Then, suddenly, light. Not the yellow glow of a flashlight, but the pale gray light of the morning sky. They tumbled out of a small opening in the rock on the other side of the mountain. Local volunteers found them a day later. The 5 teenagers sat in the grass, holding hands and staring silently at a single point in the distance. They survived. Physically, they had nothing but scratches and exhaustion, but they were no longer the same teenagers who had entered the tunnel. Max never entered a dark room again. He slept only under bright lamps.
Katja quit gymnastics because any enclosed space triggered suffocating panic attacks. Dan stopped joking completely. He became quiet and often flinched at his own shadow. Artem began drawing, thousands of drawings of tunnels, which he burned every night. And Lisa. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Lisa would begin whispering the same strange symbols they had seen carved into the walls. They escaped the catacombs, but the catacombs never left them. And sometimes, when a room becomes too quiet, each of them can still hear the whisper, calling them back into the void.
Thank you for listening to these stories until the end. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more creepy and mysterious stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you have your own scary story, feel free to share it in the comments. See you in the next story.